The following material addresses complex psychological and neurological mechanics. Processing this information safely requires a regulated nervous system and a baseline of autonomous agency. The most persistent, unaddressed pain in the human experience stems from a specific origin: repeated boundary violations in childhood, delivered under the guise of love. This erosion follows a predictable chronological path. It begins with the mother. It moves to the father, it extends to educators, and eventually encompasses the extended family. These violations are rarely malicious. The harm comes from a complete absence of clarity in language, a reflexive reactivity from caretakers that passes itself off as protection. Receiving this imprecise love induces an immediate psychological response: intense cognitive dissonance. This flowchart illustrates the progression. When cognitive dissonance is sustained long enough, it degrades into a permanent state of mental fog. That sustained mental fog produces an identity crisis so complete that an individual loses the biological ability to recognize which thoughts entering their mind are authentically their own. An authentic, uniquely owned thought is an emanation of the soul, rising physically through every cell, tissue, and organ in the biological body. Accessing that authentic thought requires a strict physiological prerequisite: a state of infinite nothingness and uninterrupted stillness, a biological condition the ancients called Ein Sof, or the void. Medical professionals routinely misunderstand the mechanism for this, known as interoception. They can recite the textbook definition, but they cannot apply it because they lack the inner stillness required to actually feel it operating within their own nervous systems. True interoception is the empirical observation of microchanges in your neurotransmitter function and microbiome in real time, detecting the data of being alive without narrating a story about it. The living human body operates as a symphony orchestra, running multi-layered, multidimensional jazz improvisation across trillions of cells simultaneously. When this internal world is first revealed, the mind is confronted by celestial shadows and inner darkness it has never been trained to see. Because the brain is unequipped to process the sudden downward focus, the initial experience is one of intense terror and helplessness. This anatomical map of the vagus nerve explains why. 80% of the messages traveling through this network travel upward, from the gut and the heart up into the brain. The body detects threat data first, long before the brain can process it. The conditioned mind is unequipped to send calming signals downward. Instead, it suppresses this massive upward flow of physical data entirely, processing backward, suppressing the body's primary biological signals to favor the conditioned noise of the brain, is the physical root of mental fog. People seek silence from external interruption, retreating to a quiet room or building a man cave, and mistake that isolation for inner peace. They drink, smoke, and use drugs as self-administered anesthesia, deployed specifically to prevent facing the internal void. Both men and women utilize these identical numbing strategies to ensure they remain undisturbed inside their own mental chatter. A lifetime of overriding these biological, cognitive, and spiritual boundaries results in galoot personality disorder. The primary symptom is a resentment so deeply embedded that the person cannot name it. The simple act of saying no triggers a nervous system response akin to a scene from a horror film. They imagine rejection and anticipate a destroyed relationship, leading them to capitulate, violate their own boundaries, and self-sabotage to avoid the imagined conflict. Achieving the stillness of Ein Sof is the mandatory physical prerequisite to setting an honest boundary without experiencing terror. Only from that state of the void does a stated boundary carry no emotional charge, allowing relationships to deepen rather than destruct. True intimacy requires the enforcement of biological safety through calm, terror-free boundaries. Jewish identity is a biological reality expressed through an ancient encrypted language. The Creator operates this divine communication system through divinity implanted directly inside the human soul. This conceptual network topology maps the architecture. Every human soul carries a unique spiritual identifier and an encrypted protocol located in the central node of the heart. This protocol is accessible only to Yekida, the highest level of the soul. This identifier wirelessly connects the human biological system back to the mainframe, the source or creator. The creator is not deaf. You simply have too much noise in your head. You are drowning in the ghost voices of your past, mistaking the haunting for the actual signal. History unconsciously documents this exact necessity to filter noise. As Shakespeare wrote in The Merchant of Venice, "Allay thy ecstasy, in measure reign thy joy." The internal void is the exact biological coordinate where the spiritual signal lives and operates. These theoretical concepts of the soul map directly to modern clinical biology. This split-screen visualization shows the parallel structure. On the left, the microbiota gut-brain axis access physical hardware processing the soul's interoceptive data. Clinical data demonstrates that psychological stress and childhood boundary violations cause physical inflammation, blocking these exact neural pathways. The inability to say no is a measurable immunological and neurological failure of the vagus nerve to conduct data. Inner peace is clinically identical to clearing that systemic inflammation out of the neural pathway. Ancient mystical concepts like Ein Sof and Yekida operate as precise pre-scientific manuals for regulating the human nervous system and restoring vagal tone. The solution requires a conscious decision to willingly embrace the internal darkness and locate the void. The sequence of healing is mechanical. Entering the stillness clears the biological inflammation. Clearing the inflammation reconnects the vagus nerve. Reconnecting the vagus nerve transmits the soul's signal back to the creator. Your physical body is a profound, unrepeatable biological event. It is trillions of cells engaging in spontaneous harmony. The mechanical act of inhaling and exhaling is the immediate, observable data of existence. Fostering immense gratitude for the gift of birth and for the sheer privilege of possessing a functional human nervous system is the foundation of this connection. By clearing the mental fog and defending our biological boundaries, we transform the terrifying void into the birthplace of our truest power.